the OLR portal of NCTE. I am Gopal Thakur from MGAHV, Central University, Wardha, and I'm here to discuss about ethnographic research. Ethnography is one of the main research methods under the qualitative approach of researches in social sciences and education. So in this today we'll discuss about the core elements of ethnography, like what is ethnographic inquiry, its purpose, why is it done, then its methodology, how is it done. We'll also try to know about the historical evolution of ethnography as a method of educational research, as a method of social science research. We'll try to understand whether the outcome, whether the result of ethnographic research is testable or not. And then we'll see on whom this study is conducted. Indigenous people, as they say, and the fieldwork we'll try to understand. Let us first try to understand what is ethnography. As you can see, if you break the word into two parts, then the parts are like ethno and graphy. Ethno refers to human culture and graphy means description of. So if you club the two, then the meaning of ethnography is like description of human culture. So ethnographic research is a process that is used in the scientific study of human interactions in social setting. It is used extensively in anthropology, but of late it has become very popular in many different fields over the past few years, like nursing, education, market research, business studies, etc. So, to make a better sense of what is ethnography, we can say ethnography is the in-depth study of naturally occurring behavior within a culture or social group. It seeks to understand the relationship between culture and behavior, with culture referring to the beliefs, values, and attitudes of a specific group of people. And with this aim, an ethnographer when goes to field, what does he do? What does she do? So an ethnographer documents routine daily lives of people. He or she tries to explore a cultural group. An ethnographer with an intention of doing ethnographic study lives with people or spends a lot of time with them. And before going to the field, he or she has a guiding question that evolves during the study once the ethnographer reaches the cultural setup where he is conducting the study. And when he or she gets to know about the cultural patterns, social behavior, human interactions, then that guiding question keeps unfolding, keeps evolving during the process of ethnographic study. So, to begin with, when an ethnographer reaches that particular setting to do ethnographic research, he or she tries to identify geographical and temporal coordinates, makes visible lives of those not normally told. The purpose of ethnography is because generally ethnography is conducted on a specific social group or cultural setting which is generally not so explored, not so associated with the mainstream population or with the mainstream society. Generally, this has been a trend over the period of time. So an ethnographer tries to obtain insider's view of how a group manages and organizes their time and life processes. Ethnographer also tries to understand the point of view from inside the group, and for that he needs to become or she needs to become a participant observer. So an ethnographer becomes, during the process of ethnographic study, a part of that social setting. It's a deliberate effort that an ethnographer is supposed to make. Ethnographer aims to identify behavior patterns and anticipate to make the reader understand the perspective of the native to the culture studied. Ethnographer also tries to understand context, complexity, and politics of social process. Let us see how this ethnographic study evolved as a method of educational research or as a method of social science research. The evolution of ethnography as a method or as a discipline can be traced back to the work of Morgan. Morgan was a lawyer and anthropologist. In 1851, he published an ethnography about Indians in the United States of America, but he didn't gather the information himself. It was based on his ethnography was based on the data collected by others. So Morgan can be attributed to the root of ethnography. However, Malinowski is considered as the father of modern anthropology, and this ethnographic method, the evolution, the present shape of this method or the framework of ethnographic method, all these credits related to ethnographic research method can be attributed to Malinowski. The first ethnographies in Britain were published in 1898-99, and they were built on field research like we know it today. And Malinowski was the man who shaped, who evolved. He can be considered as the propounder of this research method. Let us see, because we in our life, in our academics, we come across many different research methods. There are quantitative approach based research methods, experimental, survey and others. Then there are qualitative research methods, many like ground theory, ethnography, phenomenology, case study. So let us try to understand what is important for ethnography. I mean, if an ethnographer goes to field, so what are those important things that he can claim that no, ethnography is very specific in a manner that makes this research method special? And what is important about that? Accurate information, complex information, observation, that is participant observation, then thick description, as Clifford Geertz says about. Ethnographers are supposed to describe the phenomena, describe the cultural or social setting studied in a manner that should be like a thick description. It should not leave in even a minute reference or minute information about that social setting or cultural setting. So it should encompass each and every detail. That is called thick description. And when, as an ethnographer, you go to the field, then speaking the native language is very important, because unless and until you try to communicate with them in their language, they will not open up. So speaking the native language is very important in ethnography. And researchers should have no contact with his or her context, because if as an ethnographer you keep on switching contact from your field to your original place where you have come from, then the overall mindset as a researcher you can lose the spirit and mindset, because you have to become a participant observer, you have to become a member of their cultural setting, social setting. So you must not contact your own context, then you should try to seek information naturally instead of having informants. Don't behave like you are spying on them. You should be very familiar, be very cordial, be very friendly with them, and that happens only when you spend a lot of time with them. So you seek information in a natural manner. And obviously, as an ethnographer, you should have a strong theoretical background, because unless and until you have a theoretical background, you would find it very difficult to connect the data collected in your field, to connect the information or the perspectives that you develop in your field to relate back to the theoretical framework. So you must have a theoretical framework in your mind, and your theoretical that background should be very strong. You should join yourself with the natives, and then you try to develop typical ways of thinking and feeling. Always remember, as Malinowski said, use the native language as an instrument. So your using native language should be instrumental in purpose. Always keep in mind, if you use your own language, there is a chance of developing a communication barrier with the people in the field. So you always use native language, the language of those people whom you are going to study about. So the methodology of ethnography constitutes identifying problem or topic of interest. Obviously, without that you cannot go to field. Then you plan your field work, data collection, and then analysis. For data collection, participant observation is the sole or the most important thing. And then once you collect the data, then you analyze it holistically, and you finally prepare a report of your study. The characteristics of ethnographic research is that it is holistic in nature. Data collection and analysis occur together. Obviously, data collection you do every day in your fieldwork. Every day you interact with people, and then concluding your day, you start thinking about the data collected. Data is not in numeral forms. Those are based on your conversations, informal discussions, observations of their rituals, observations of their day-to-day daily behavior, how they spend their daily life, how do they interact with each other, what do they do in a normal condition. So these things are your observations, and with the help of those information that you collect in mind or you take a field note, you try to analyze that data on everyday basis, because while analyzing, your insight keeps developing. You keep evolving new perspective about the field. So the data collection and analysis goes hand in hand together, and that gives an insight to you to take appropriate decision, to make appropriate decision about tomorrow, what you are going to do in field. And remember, this data collection oscillates between individuals and groups, because you are supposed to understand the cultural, social setting. So individual as well as group, both are important to you to collect your data. The field work involves selection and sampling. You select a particular field, you select a particular community where you have to go to do ethnography. Then sampling is obviously, in ethnography you don't have a large sample, rather your field and the people of your field are your sample. That is generally very less in number. Then you do participant observation. Interview is another thing that you do. Sometimes you do autobiographical interviewing. You interact with person informally, and then you try to get to know their life history, their family history, and all that. You may have certain questionnaires beforehand, but those questionnaires need to be refined, rearranged during the course of your fieldwork. Sometimes you have to adopt projective techniques. Then participants classification, outcropping, existing document information, folk tales, field notes. These things are very important for your fieldwork related to your ethnography. In ethnography, your data is like verbal descriptions of people, interactions with them, settings. Obviously, you observe the social or cultural setting, then objects and phenomena with the context being studied. And the data sources are people, where you go to do ethnographic study, settings and relevant objects being observed. The process of ethnography has data collection, as we discussed, is done by the researcher through observation, often combined with formal and informal interviews. Data treatment and analysis involves presentation of verbal descriptions or logical analysis of information to discover salient patterns and themes. Here there is no numerical or statistical analysis. So with the verbal data, you need to collate them, organize them in a manner that you can identify certain patterns and themes in that data. And for that you need to do coding. Coding leads you well on your way to transforming your field notes into writings that speak to wider audiences. You will shift through your notes and look for threads that can be woven together. And while doing coding, you do line by line categorization of specific notes. Coding helps you to discover, create original theory in your data. That is like a grounded theory research you do. So coding helps you to discover original theory in your data. You need to read line by line through your field notes very sincerely, very carefully, writing codes you need to do in the margins and reread them until you have exhausted all possibilities of codes. And codes is what about? Themes, issues and ideas. In social setting, like they have some rituals, they have some festivals, they have marriage, they have kinship relationship, they have maybe their family may have patriarchy or matriarchy, whatever it is. How do they relate to each other? How do they extend greetings? How do they eat together? How do they celebrate any occasion? Or how do they feel sorrows, happiness, and how do they express all such feelings? So these things are theme based, issues based politics, internal conflicts, rivalry, cohesiveness, fraternity, solidarity. These things you can find in any society, but here specifically on a cultural or social setting where you're going to study, you need to observe carefully, and more carefully you need to assign theme to all those field notes. And once you do that, you start analysis. You start evaluating the relevance of those themes, issues. You try to look for patterns, considering phenomena through the cultural perspective. As Geach says, thick description is very important. Don't leave anything minute, because even those minute observation can be very important at times. So thick description is what is required here. And then you do classification, parameters, a teak observation, that is outside observation, outsider's perspective of observation, maps, drawings and charts you can use. While analyzing data, you need to ask questions to your own data. You have to find answers from your data about what are people doing, what are they trying to accomplish, how exactly do they do this, what specific means and or strategies do they use to accomplish what they desire, how do members talk about, characterize and understand what is going on, what assumptions are they making, what do I see going on here, what did I learn from these notes, how to get from data to analysis. All these things are there that you need to ask from your own data. And the way you write, the way you describe based on your field notes, based on your observations is very important in ethnographic study. Writing must be good from the field notes to the final product, because you have to keep in your mind, you have to write for your audience, and your audience are your academic peer, academic experts, teachers, further researchers who are not from that social setup or cultural setup where you have studied this ethnography. So you need to write from their perspective, outsiders' perspective, but in a very objective manner. So write for the objective to make the outsider's perspective see the insider's perspective. So here this balance should be maintained. Here is an example of more objective writing or a subjective writing. You can differentiate this. This has been taken from a source which is available as open educational resources. The description is, the more objective is, the waiting room of the antenatal clinic was empty except for one girl who looked to be approximately 5 to 8 years old. She was sitting in the corner behind a chair. She peeked out from behind it and looked at us when we entered the room talking. Her nose was running and her eyes were red and swollen. See, this is one description. And let us see what the another description is, which is more subjective, where the person who is describing, his or her subjectivity has influenced this writing. Same context, same phenomena. Let's see. The waiting room of the antenatal clinic was deserted except for a young girl who had been abandoned there by her mother. She had been wedged into the corner behind a chair so she wouldn't wander off. She glared at us because we were making so much noise. She had probably been crying for a long time. Here lots of assumptions, lot of perceptions, individual judgment has been made. And the first paragraph above is more objective. So an ethnographer's responsibility is to make their writing more objective. It would not be numerals in terms, it would be descriptive only, but here you can find the difference between objective type of writing, between objective statements, description, and subjective description. So you have to become objective while describing any particular situation. And for doing so, you have to become very conscious, you have to be very, very balanced in field. How do you take notes? So first, as an ethnographer, you should take note of all impressions, including senses, details about the physical setting, including size, space, noise, colors, equipment, and movement. You should take note of people in the setting, such as number, gender and race, appearance, dress movement, feeling, and tone. Ethnography is a process where you have to become, since this is a qualitative approach, so without assigning numerals or numbers, because you're not supposed to do statistical analysis, so you have to note the details about the physical setting, including size, space, noise, colors, equipment. With some pictorial view, it has been tried to delineate what all, if you are doing ethnography and if you are in this field, so what all you have to note down. Here is an example of how you describe, how you take a detail and further write about the physical setting. This has been taken from a research done by myself. Here, Shahpur is a block, and one of the 5 tehsils of Betul district is situated in the southern part of Madhya Pradesh, extending between 77 degree 55 and north latitude and 22 degrees 05 east longitude. Physically, the whole of the block lies on the Satpura plateau at an elevation of 401 meters from the mean sea level. The plateau has been deeply eroded, especially along the water courses on the trap. The sandstone areas in the north have also been denuded mostly along their margins, and several angular projections of the escarpments and steeply rising residual hills are marked, forming Bhavargarh Hills, Jamgarh, Bhaskindev and Soligarh Hills. It is for these reasons, together with the high forest and damp climate, that the communication in the area has been more difficult in the past, and the road system is still in the developing stage, except the one which traverses the area connecting Itarsi with Betul and further heading to Nagpur. So you can see the setup or the location, situatedness of the place has been described, giving all physical details, physical settings. There are many such. I have just used one slide to make you understand how writing is done in ethnographic description. You have to, along with physical setting, you have to note down and write further interactional detail, observing events in an intimate microscopic manner to recount what happened in fine detail, like key events. Focusing on key events such as weddings, funerals, etc. is a useful way to organize your field notes. It involves selecting noteworthy incidents out of the flow of ongoing activity. This process of ethnographic research requires you have to have a question or concern, and that you have to identify for the study. Then a group to study is identified, which is typically small, typically purposely selected. The sampling is purposive sampling done here, and the identified group is typically small. You as an ethnographer need to become a participant observer. That means you have to become part of their social processes, part of their everyday life. You can see the field, you can have a glimpse, you can develop an idea that when you go in field, you just mingle with them, just become like a part of them, and then you involve in their everyday activities or like their rituals, their festivals. Then only that barrier of communication you are able to break. The researcher watches and listens attentively and records as much detail as possible. This is called naturalistic observation. So everybody in different types of social settings sits together or interacts together, and then researcher, the ethnographer, records those details. And since all these details are noted down, to be noted down, large amount of notes are typically generated. This process may take many months, sometimes years. But for academic research, you can extend it to like 6 months, 9 months, or a year or so, depending upon the nature of your inquiry. And then those large amount of notes are your sources of data. And as a researcher, you need to analyze the notes, identify themes, look for answers to research questions, and make logical inferences. The final step to write the research paper or your research thesis describing the process, observations, findings, and conclusion. So this is the final step where you need to write in detail everything. Often rich descriptions are provided so the readers can make their own interpretations. Here, when you are describing the social setting, you need to, most of the time in your thesis, in your research, in paper, you need to quote their statements. you need to explain what you perceived and how you are describing objectively. For that, you need to put here the statements given by the people of those social setting, and you need to describe the phenomena as in the previous slides it was shown very objectively. The strength and weaknesses of ethnographic research. Let us discuss about, well, you can find strength and weaknesses of any type of research, be it quantitative, be it qualitative, be it survey, experimental, ethnography, phenomenology, whatever it is. Because not a single research method is perfect in itself. So, coming to the strength of ethnography, it looks at the situation holistically, a comprehensive picture you need to develop, perceive and describe. It may arrive at greater understanding of the problem than other research processes, because in survey studies you collect data using questionnaire or interview. Those are very formal in nature. The real information you may not get during that process. But in ethnographic studies, since you become a part of that social setting, a part of that cultural setting, so you may garner, you may generate, you may develop greater understanding of the problem compared to what any other research method can do. However, the concerns or the weakness of this process, of this methodology, is that as a researcher you may have your biases. Generally one always has. So the possible bias on the part of the observer can influence the outcome of the result, and which leads to the validity concerns of the study. Generalizability is the another concern. But anyway, in qualitative research, in ethnography, you are not supposed to generalize. Though in research studies, it is expected that your research findings should be in a manner that one can derive, one can develop understanding about that particular situation, which could be applied to another situation as well. So that is what a generalization is called. But here, this concern may be something to understand, but in qualitative study, that is fine. Even if you're not able to generalize, fine. However, your information, your outcome, your findings of the result should be valid. And how that could be judged? What are the criteria for judging qualitative research? So there are 4 things we can see. Credibility of your research finding. That relates to, would the group being observed say the findings were credible? Are the findings logical and reasonable? For that, you can do one thing, that once you collect data and once you write in your own descriptive style for the audience outside that social setting, before making it public, before bringing it into the final shape, you need to consult your field, consult those people once again, and then take their perspective, whether what you have written is exactly what they wanted to say, or what you have written is exactly what their social setting is all about. Another criteria of seeking or judging the qualitative research is transferability. That is, would a reader be willing to transfer the results to another group or setting? Exactly. This is what I was saying, that generalizability in different, like quantitative research, generalizability is there. But if you say in qualitative approach, like ethnographic study, whether your findings, like, see, there is one community, Korku, another community is there, Gond, there may be another tribal community or any other community on whom ethnographic studies can be conducted. So you have to see, you have to make it as far as possible that your study findings are applicable using certain parameters to other social setting as well. Though it is very difficult, because every social setting has its own specificity. Despite that, you have to check whether transferability of your findings is there or not. Then comes dependability. The researcher accurately describes the context, setting, and changes that may have occurred during the study. And conformability, like if there were additional observers, would they describe the situation the same and arrive at the same conclusion? So these things are there to help you establish the quality of your findings. They may not be possible exactly in the manner like in quantitative studies. These things are confirmed, these things are ensured. But in qualitative study, you can just have a check using these parameters whether your qualitative study, the findings are up to the mark or not. There may be certain differences, but even if it is giving a clear picture of the social setting or cultural setting, that is fine, absolutely fine. So ethnography is of late is a very popular research method that people are using to find the reality, to explore the truth, to understand the social setting, cultural setting of any community, any society. And of late, particularly in postmodernist era, this has gained very importance in academics, and as researcher one can understand the basic essence, because numerals are not always fruitful to give a clear picture of reality. To understand social behavior, to understand human behavior, human emotions, sentiments, human interactions, you need to adopt a research method which can understand all these things. Thank you very much.